Let me ask you this. Can you remember this?
Super? What's super?
Super's here for everybody right across the nation.
The 3% you're getting now provides a good foundation.
Any more than that and you'll have cause for celebration.
To plan for your retirement, think of superannuation.
Now, that ad was seared into the young brain of one Jay Manning at the time, and I had zero idea what superannuation was. Fast forward 30-odd years, I'm checking my super balance regularly. Now, no doubt you've heard the stories of just how big the Australian super pool is. Well, in 1992, when that ad came out, the Keating government passed legislation of the superannuation guarantee. And today, the size of the weekly required investments is absolutely staggering. Philip McGann is the Director of Claritude Financial Planning right here in Brisbane. And we're here to talk super. And please understand, when we talk super with Phil, any advice is broad in nature and doesn't pertain to your specific circumstances. But Phil, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming in on a Sunday.
No problems at all, Johnny. Nice to have a chat.
Absolutely. Now, superannuation is some kind of beast at the moment. Now, how big is the Aussie super pool?
How big is it? At the moment, it's 4.1 trillion Australian dollars.
How big is a trillion?
A trillion is a lot of many zeros at the end. Put into context, the Australian, it's approximately almost twice the size of the Australian economy.
My God.
Yes, so it's very, very big. And it all flows back, as you said in the intro there, from 1992 when we had compulsory super starting at a very low level. Now it's 11.5% of every employee's salary goes into super,
right,
rising to 12% in July.
Okay, that is a lot of money. And I know a trillion's a lot. So how much do they have to... There's an amount of money that these super funds have to find a home for each week.
Each week. So basically, working on those figures, it's estimated it's $3.3 billion a week that flows into all the super funds in the country. That can be self-managed or industry or retail or whatever.
Right.
But all those funds need to find a home. So all of those superannuation investment managers every week say, oh, I've got another $3.3 billion. What are we going to do with this? So then they have to invest it in the markets.
Okay. Now, I'm not as obviously well-versed in the financial market as you, but if I look at something that big, is it stable or is it a potential to be a house of cards?
No, it's stable.
It's stable.
It's good. It's good. It's stable from the point of view that what a lot of the big super funds are doing now is, yes, they invest in local listed shares, overseas shares, everything from Apple and Netflix to BHP and ANZ, all the rest. But increasingly what they're doing, and particularly the big industry funds, they're investing in unlisted assets. So they'll go and buy an airport somewhere, or they'll buy an office tower in a capital city, that sort of idea. On the airport front, Australian Super, Australian Retirement Trust, two big industry funds, they own part of Brisbane Airport. They own part of Sydney Airport. They're all unlisted companies. You can't, as an individual investor, buy shares in Sydney Airport anymore because they're not listed on the ASX because they've been taken over and delisted and put into these super funds.
But so a company like a super fund can approach these unlisted companies and say, we want to buy a share of you.
Correct.
And hence generate a share of that profit that your company is generating.
Correct, that's it. And basically they're very patient investors because the whole point of superannuation is a long-term investment for retirement.
Yeah.
So one of the big industry funds can think, well, we know we've got X amount of people who will retire in 20 years, 25, 30 years' time. Let's buy assets now that will appreciate in value and get going into the future. Airports are monopoly assets. They're heavily regulated. So you're basically getting a good return. Every time I say to my clients, every time you go to Brisbane Airport and you pay $8 for a coffee and $20 to park for 3 minutes,
in the future.
You are benefiting yourself in a superannuation sense.
There's a spin on airport prices, Phil. A positive spin on it. I like that. Now, let me ask you this. We're at South Bank here in Brisbane. If I look across the river, I can see a couple of pretty impressive buildings with superannuation company logos on them.
Correct.
Are they investing in those buildings? Is that part of their investment scheme as well?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Basically, they have a couple of those buildings there have actually been built by the industry super funds in particular, and then they lease them out to long-term tenants, governments, state, local, federal, whatever, over decades, and that income then goes to their owners, who are the superannuants in their funds.
It certainly makes me feel better hearing that.
It does.
After seeing these huge buildings that I think, I've contributed to the sale of, to the construction of that building.
Yes, that's it.
Let me ask you this. So 30 years ago, or 33 years ago, coming up in July, it was this legislation of the superannuation guarantee was passed, essentially to ease the burden on pensions when people were were retiring, and then which in turn eases the burden on the taxpayer.
Correct. That was part of the reason behind it. It wasn't there initially to replace the age pension, but it was there to supplement your age pension, to give you a better retirement and allow the government of the day not to have to fund as much. Still there, age pension's still there, and a lot of people still receive the age pension.
As well as their super contribution as well.
Or whether a part pension or a full pension, depending on how much money you've got in super. It's quite generous when you really think of all the way through. But the interesting thing is on current projections, I had a look at these figures the other day in preparation for this. Currently in Australia, we spend 2.5% of GDP, of gross domestic product, on the pension system in Australia, the government age pension. That's forecast to drop to 2% by 2060. Now, the reason for that is because there'll be more people having a lot more money in super, needing less money support them from the federal government. But in contrast, when you look at other countries, in particular in Europe, the OECD countries, the average is 9%, 9.3%.
Oh, wow.
That is a lot of money. So they've got ageing populations, as we all do, but they've got a lot more burden on them than we will here in Australia because of the vast amount of money we've got in superannuation.
Now, you mentioned how big it was, 4.2 trillion.
4.1, depending on the day you look.
Now we're about to overtake Canada, which is just under twice the population of us with our superannuation pool, and we're about to overtake the UK, which is nearly 3 times our population.
Yeah. So we will be the second biggest retirement savings pool in the world, behind the US.
Which is that they call it a 401k.
Yeah, those sorts of things and other things over there. But effectively, Australia's a very small population base in comparison to, say, the US, but compared to Canada and the UK, as you said a moment ago. And it sort of shows how we punch above our weight big time. Not just in sport, but in superannuation money. That makes a big difference because it means that our industry funds in particular, big retail funds, can go overseas and buy big assets for the long-term benefit of the locals here in Australia.
It's 10:30. You're on 612 ABC Brisbane and Queensland. Johnny Manning talking to Phil McGann, who is the Director of Claritude Financial. We're talking all things superannuation. Now, you just spoke about the opportunity is now there for these huge super funds to potentially look outside our shores for investments.
They do a lot of it now, yeah.
We've seen the markets bounce in the last couple of weeks. We all understand why they've bounced, obviously because of international circumstances that are contributing to everyone's super fund going down and then up and then sort of hovering around an acceptable level. What can we expect long term from this, reasonably trajectory that is reasonably up and down over the last little period?
Yeah. Oh, look, the current issues in the market are definitely down to the tariff scenario in the US. What markets don't like is uncertainty. And so we don't know what the tariffs will be, at what level and on whom, and at what time frame. And so the markets are jumping to the worst case, as they always do. Yep. Markets always overreact on the upside. Everything's wonderful and they bid things up. The world's going to end tomorrow and they'll bid things down.
Right.
So what the current issue is there's a lot of noise there, but there is some substance to it because there will be some tariffs going forward. But the best thing people can do with superannuation as a general comment is do nothing. Sit on your hands. Don't panic about these things. Keep in mind that you're not retiring tomorrow. You might have 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years to go. You are basically, your employer is putting more into your superannuation account every pay period. It's forced consumption. Or should I say, you're basically directing your consumption into the future. So you're not consuming now, but you're consuming into the future.
Yep.
So that's the best thing. There's volatility in the world, and this is not unusual. At the moment, and it's all about tariffs. Not that long ago, in the last 4 to 5 years, we've had other things that came up. Obviously, we all remember COVID. That was a very big issue, a global pandemic. Markets came off in a big way, recovered fairly quickly. We've had the GFC a few years before that. Things have recovered well since. But whether it's Ukraine or the Middle East or something else, there's always something going on in markets, Johnny. And people need to be conscious that you're investing for the longer term, not for the next few weeks.
I think that's a pretty good piece of advice to finish up on, Phil. We appreciate it. And once again, that was Phil McGann, the Director of Claritude Financial, talking all things superannuation. But just do remember that advice is broad in nature. If someone does think after this chat, Phil, oh my God, okay, I think I need to potentially take some action, what's the best thing they should do?
They should talk to a financial planner.
There we go. Fantastic. Phil, thank you so much for coming in and on a Sunday of all days.
No dramas, Johnny. Thanks, mate.